What's up, guys? So today we're going to do Deshaun Watson, his 2022 debut, his Browns debut against his old Houston Texans teammates. Those of them that are left, at least. Deshaun Watson was really, really bad. And in fact, I almost didn't make this video if it weren't for some really insistent fans, because I didn't think that there was anything to write home about. Like, it was an abysmal performance. What more do you want? Regardless, I went through it anyway. I think that there are some real things to be worried about. Primarily, I think that his lack of arm strength and his consequent overthrowing of the ball, not overthrowing as in too far, too high, or too hard, but overthrowing as in putting too much of his body into it, which causes balls to hit the ground. I think that his play recognition and his post-snap processing have been terrible, and I'm not so sure that those kinds of things go away with reps when rust gets knocked off. Rust is more of a timing issue. This isn't timing. This is he's not seeing things. This is he is not operating well within structure, and I think that it's going to be a real big problem for Kevin Stefanski, who loves really structured quarterback play. He hates ad-libbing. He hates quarterbacks who go downfield. He wants to stay on rhythm, ahead of the chains, short passes, consistently accurate, and that is simply not what Deshaun Watson wants to do or is good at doing. Enough dilly-dallying, though. Let's get to the wretched film. Right to it. Deshaun Watson debut with the Browns, Week 13. Houston Texans. They're going to ease him into this game. They're going to try to run the ball and play a lot of short game. Like right here, okay, so I know what you're thinking. At first glance, it's really easy to think that this first throw is a perfectly pedestrian throw and it should definitely be caught. But actually, what's going on here, the reason this is incomplete is because Watson's really slow to diagnose. So you know this is a one-read play, right? You're not progressing through all your wide receivers. It progresses too quick for you to actually read. So right here, the ball should already be out. Watson's still holding on to it. He's late. See how much separation he had? Because he's late and because that ball doesn't have enough velocity, because his arm's not that strong, the defender has an ability to break on the ball, hit the receiver, and jar it loose. Now here, Deshaun Watson, this is actually extremely emblematic of Deshaun Watson's career. One thing that I'm low on Deshaun Watson because I don't believe that what he does right here is sustainable. However, I am open to the idea that it is just a unique talent that he has. Right here, the ball needs to be out, right? This play is designed to basically set up this tight end like a blocker, hit the running back here, and hope that he can get a couple yards. Instead, Watson stares him down. Look, he has not stopped looking at this running back. He literally looks at the same player the whole time. He never looks over here at Amari Cooper, who's also wide open for the first down, and he waits until a pressure hits him in the face. Now, right here, this should be a sack. I think that's Jonathan Greener just doesn't wrap up properly and completely misses. Watson breaks the sack. Now, that's a plus pocket movement. Here, he rolls out a little bit, and then he throws a terrible pass to an open receiver. Now, that's a bad pass, but it's also at least one plus movement, probably two. Now, is that Deshaun Watson? First of all, Deshaun Watson displayed terrible pocket awareness on that play, and that's something that he's always done, even with the Texans, even in his best season of 2020. That being said, that ability to break that sack, is that a fluke? Is that a bad defensive end on a bad team making a bad play, or is that Deshaun Watson being special? I actually am not sure how I feel. So, for the time being, it'll be a moderately negative play simply because the throw was inaccurate, and we won't ding him for his terrible pocket awareness just yet. Because the Texans are totally incompetent, Watson's going to get the ball in great field position, and he's going to have ample opportunity to put some points on the board today. Spoiler alert, he won't. Now here, again, it looks like a completion. It looks fun because he moves around, but that ball needs to be out right now. This play worked perfectly. Harrison Bryant's going to cut through here on this seam. He's open right here. This ball needs to go deep here. But if it's not, it needs to already be out on either of these curls because they are just standing there, wide open, hanging out, waiting. Watson's really, really slow to diagnose that. So yes, it's a pedestrian throw. He gets the ball out, but he's really, really late. And no, that fumble has nothing to do with him. But that's just another instance of Watson's processing not being up to snuff. Sure, it's a pedestrian play. Sure, he gets a plus pocket movement. Overall, it is a positive play in my grading system. However, if we're looking at the traits and we're trying to break down the player as a whole, it's another unimpressive play. He's trying to overcome his own shortcomings mentally. Maybe that's rust, but it's also something we've seen throughout his career. 1-2. The Browns are going to come out running. It's successful as always. Nick Chubb, he's special. Here it's a simple RPO, and Deshaun Watson just misses. He actually misses low a lot in this game. You'll see it throughout the entire game. And I think it's because he's trying to overthrow the ball. As I mentioned earlier, first of all, I mean, this is wide open. There's no reason that ball should be hitting the ground. You'll note that I continually say Deshaun Watson doesn't have that strong of an arm, which kind of clashes with the public perception of him. Here, that's a nice little pocket move, but again, a bad throw. That ball is an easy completion. It is 6 yards downfield to a running back, and it is hitting the ground. That's terrible. It's because he's overthrowing it. He doesn't have that strong of an arm, so if he wants zip, he has to put his whole ass into his throws. He torques his core really, really hard when he's throwing, even short passes, because he's trying to get as much velocity as possible. And when you do that, you open yourself up to lots of not underthrown, but low-thrown balls. Here, it's a good pocket movement to get out of the pocket, and it's a pedestrian throw to hit his running back. However, it's barely pedestrian because, really, if we're being honest, this should have been a much easier throw, and Kareem Hunt should have been able to get the catch and then move after the catch. Instead, it doesn't work like that, and Jacoby Brissett has to come in and clean his mess up on 3rd and 1. I'm fucking around a little bit. That's a little bit sardonic, but you get my point. Here, it's a slight movement. I won't quite call it positive, and that's a wide open receiver. You can call it solid if you like. I think it's pedestrian. It's his first read, and he's wide the fuck open, 10 yards downfield. Like, check this out. There's barely anybody in the frame. I'm sorry, everybody hits that. It's a 12-yard pass. It's his first read. There's nothing impressive about that. You can call it solid if you like. Go ahead. Deshaun Watson could use the positive plays. Lord knows he didn't have many. And there's just no explanation for this. This is a terrible pick. He panics, he's under a tiny bit of pressure, and he guns it directly into a safety. That's inexcusable. It's so bad. You may notice that we skipped a little bit. On the last drive, the Browns got backed up, ran the ball, and got tackled for a safety. Here, pedestrian throw, simple RPO, easy underneath leverage, 5 yards downfield, no problem, nothing to it. And Kareem Hunt's going to run. They're good at that. See, this I'm not even going to grade as a pass because this is effectively just a read option. He just hands the ball off forward to the tight end. It's a cool play design, and I'm impressed with Kevin Stefanski's ingenuity to call that and his balls to call that. He's typically a little bit more conservative, but you'll notice that they're just starting to use Deshaun Watson's legs because they're not really impressed with what his arm's doing. It's a positive run, assuming that's not a hold. Oh, and it's a hold, so we take it off the board, not a positive run. Nothing at all, actually. You can't grade a run play as positive when there's a holding involved because it's just, you can't really, unless you can explicitly tell that the run would have been great without the hold, like if it's way on the other side of the play, but that was right on the strong side. Can't grade that play. So 2nd and 16, and Watson's throwing a 4-yard out. Now, great job by DPJ to get some yards after the catch, but that's a pedestrian throw, and it shows you what they think of Deshaun Watson. Also here, this is bad. They should have pulled this out. The defensive end crashes. Watson has a clear lane to the outside. He absolutely should have pulled this out and ran to the corner for the first down. Instead, he hands it off and sends Nick Chubb up a creek without a paddle. And then Kevin Stefanski has no balls, so he punts. Granted, it's the Texans, so you don't really need to chase variance, but Christ, man. So again, you may be thinking, something has changed here. DPJ returned a punt for a touchdown. Deshaun Watson still cannot get his offense to the end zone. He can't even get him to a field goal yet. We're halfway through the game against the worst team in the NFL, and we're throwing screens to tight ends because Kevin Stefanski has quickly reverted to the exact same playbook he called with Baker Mayfield when Baker Mayfield had one shoulder. Because he's not impressed, and he shouldn't be. This has been really bad. And here we go, a batted ball at the line of scrimmage. I thought that was only for short quarterbacks. Deshaun Watson's an inch and a half taller than Baker Mayfield. I mean, look, this is just bad. He's short arm. Like, the defensive tackle doesn't even have to jump. Hits him in the fucking armpit. Bad throw. Absolutely no reason for that. And he's smiling. Like, it's a really bad performance. And this throw is tough to grade. Now, I know it's not technically a fumble, but he did everything in his power to fumble this ball. He's extremely lucky that this was not called a fumble. This is a degree of millimeters separating it from a fumble. And frankly, I'm going to grade it as a fumble because it is a 50-50 shot that this ball is a fumble. It literally depends which side of the ball hits the ground first. You can grade it as bad if you like. I'm going to grade it as a no-fault sack and a fumble, with a plus move because he's throwing through contact. It comes out to be very similar as far as like how the grade shakes out in the algorithm. I don't think that this is indicative of his accuracy as a passer. I think it's indicative of his ball security, but take your pick. It's a negative play either way. We're on to the second half, and Deshaun still has not led his team on a scoring drive of any sort against the worst team in the NFL. They're throwing screens, pedestrian, routine plays that any quarterback in the NFL can execute, and that's the only time they're being successful. Here, Watson does a really good job of stepping up in the pocket. He makes a bad throw. I don't know how he thought he was going to fit that past the linebacker that's staring him in the face. With no velocity, no less. It's a bad throw. He's making terrible decisions. He's having a really hard time recognizing open receivers. This is his best throw of the day, though. You'll notice, remember when I said he puts everything on his ball because he doesn't have that much arm talent? Watch him fucking step in and zing that as hard as he can 15 yards downfield. Now, that's the only throw I graded as solid in this game. It's a solid throw. Great zip. Hit the guy, right on time. Solid. It's not great. It's not elite for sure, but it's a solid throw. Here, there's a bad pull. His read has to be, does this defensive end pop out? The defensive end does not pop out. He's got two guys in his face. He needs to let this ball go in Nick Chubb's hands and run. Instead, he decides to run directly into the fucking teeth of the defense. It's a negative run. It's very, very poor diagnosis. Here, he's got a clean pocket, tons of time, and again, he just overthrows the ball, puts it direct, overthrows as in, like, throws it too much, rather than throws it too far. He tries to put way too much heat on it, and he throws it right in the dirt. It's like when you're trying to throw a pitch as a kid, and you can't quite make it to the plate yet, so you throw it as hard as you can, and you accidentally spike it. That's what he's doing out there on the football field, as a pro. So the Browns' defense has gotten in on the fun, and they got their own scoop and score touchdown as well. The only part of the team that hasn't scored a touchdown so far has been the part that employs the wildly expensive quarterback. Here, Deshaun gets a plus move for escaping the pocket, and he gets a pedestrian for slipping the ball into DPJ's hands. Congrats. Lots of running. Now again, I don't exactly blame the Browns for going conservative here. They're up by 6 against the worst team in the NFL, but it's telling that they're not trying to throw the ball downfield. Okay, here, this is obliviousness. Right here, Deshaun Watson's at the top of his break. Now, he can't really throw this out. It's covered. He could try to put it outside and look for a dive, but it's covered. He could slip the ball out to his running back right here. That's fine. He also has an out at the bottom of the screen off camera. However, he panics. He doesn't know what to do. He's late on his recognition. He's late to get it to the running back, and he eats a sack. That's on him. That's something he does a lot. Deshaun Watson is amongst the worst in the NFL, has been amongst the worst in the NFL, with the Texans at least, in taking bad sacks. Him, Russell Wilson, and Joe Burrow are some of the least pocket-aware or maybe most pocket-arrogant quarterbacks in the NFL. Granted, Burrow's cleaned that up a lot this year as opposed to the last two. End of the third quarter, and again, Watson doesn't have a single offensive point. And here, he's throwing the ball in the dirt yet again. I don't have to tell you that that's a bad throw. They're much more efficient when they run. And frankly, Jacoby Brissett was a more efficient quarterback, and Also a more explosive quarterback for this team, and neither of them is nearly as good as Baker Mayfield, obviously. The Browns are in a heap of trouble if this is the kind of play that they get out of their $230 million man. Here, another pedestrian throw. At least this one's on time, but, I mean, you'll note, look at his head. His head does not move. I'll let you watch one more time. His head does not move one time during this play. He is staring at his primary read. Primary read, primary read. Hit the curl, that's it. He is not processing the game like a professional quarterback should. And he never really did in Houston. Processing is not where he makes his living. He makes his living by creating high-low reads that are extremely simple, by rolling out of the pocket, out of structure, and hoping that a defensive back gets confused about whether they should cover him or the receiver, and then taking advantage of whatever decision that cornerback makes. Just as a pure pocket passer within structure, he's a bad quarterback, always has been. Not going to change it. And frankly, in the fourth quarter against the worst team in the NFL, this isn't rust. This is who he is. That's honestly my belief. Now, I could be proven wrong, but that's my prediction. Here, he gets a plus move, and I'll even give him a positive run, because he gets 10 yards. But we're getting towards the garbage end of the game, and he's still not impressing. Here he goes deep, and it's just no man's land. I don't know if that's a miscommunication or a trip or what, but the ball didn't exactly have great arc on it anyway, and I don't think any living receiver could have gotten there because the cornerbacks who were in trail coverage couldn't get there. Bad decisions, bad arm talent, bad quarterbacking. The Browns defense scores again, and we are firmly in garbage territory, so I don't expect to see much passing from Deshaun Watson at this point. It's actually surprising to me that they're running him. We'll give that a neutral run. I don't know if he fumbled there. I don't really care. Let's say he didn't. The only reason that we're still grading this game is because I believe that the Browns have an interest in making sure that he gets into some form of a rhythm before next week's game. Or, this week's game. Because I'm doing this a little bit late. It's Friday. But it's looking bleak. There's literally nothing redeeming about Deshaun Watson's performance other than the fact that he's operating the offense, and I guess he's not turning the ball over, which was a problem with Brissett. But this game's over. All right, now the game is officially over after a couple more kneels. So, what do you say? Let's get to the charts.
I did something a little cute with the charts this time. Because we only have one game of sample from Deshaun Watson, I put it next to Baker Mayfield's season so far, just for comparison's sake. Why would I compare those two? Who knows? Browns fans, I'm sure you're not interested in Baker whatsoever. I know you've completely moved on. Anyway, Deshaun Watson had 0 elite passes, obviously. He had 0 great passes. He had 1 pass that I deemed solid, 8 that were routine or pedestrian. Sorry to use that buzzword. 10 bad passes, and the 1 pickable pass. He had the 1 negative sack, 1 sack that wasn't his fault, no throwaways, 2 positive runs, and then a 3rd positive run which was called back for a crucial holding. He had a negative run where he did a really bad job of pulling the ball when he shouldn't have. 8 positive movements in the pocket, and I am charting that fumble on the throw that was a centimeter away from being a fumble 6 on his part. Regardless of how you treat that fumble, regardless of how you treat the sack, he's squarely in F territory as far as this performance goes. He was only accurate on 45% of his passes. I don't recall seeing a starting quarterback ever post such a low number. For reference, Baker Mayfield, who we all know is just terrible, right? The worst accuracy percentage he's had on this season was 66.7% against the Giants in Week 2. So Deshaun Watson is coming in way below that threshold. For those of you who are interested in comparing and contrasting the two, Watson had a positive play on 12% of his passes. On the season, so this is including all those terrible Carolina games, Baker Mayfield has a positive play on 32% of his dropbacks. Watson produced a negative play on 52% of his dropbacks. That is one of the lowest marks I've ever seen, probably bottom 10, up there with some Mac Jones and Mitch Trubisky and Jared Goff games. Meanwhile, Baker Mayfield's negative play rate is only 22.8%. Watson had a pedestrian play on 35% of his dropbacks, but the reason it's only 35 is because he missed so many throws on pedestrian attempts. It's incredible how bad he was. Listen, I've long been on the Deshaun Watson's not very good bandwagon, but even I didn't expect it to be quite this bleak, right? It's one of those games that I really didn't want to grade because I don't know what you want me to say. His processing was terrible. His accuracy was terrible. His precision was worse than his accuracy. His arm strength has never stood out as great, and it doesn't seem that he has the temperament to fit into this highly structured, low air yardage offense. He wants something that lets him improvise a little bit more and cut it loose, because Deshaun Watson doesn't actually process the game of football very well. What Deshaun Watson does well is create dilemmas for defenders. As I mentioned during the video, he really likes to roll out to his right, zero in on one receiver, and then create a dilemma so that the defensive back who's covering that receiver doesn't know if he should stop Deshaun from running or stick with the receiver and prevent the pass. And then Deshaun Watson just plays monkey in the middle with him, right? If the defender stays on the receiver, Watson will run, and if the defender comes up, Watson will just pop it over his head. That's called a high-low read. It's very common. It's something that Mitch Trubisky thrived off of when he was in Chicago. And it's what Deshaun Watson does. It's all he does well. Everything else he's not very good at. If you want to see more about my breakdown of Deshaun Watson's game, I've posted a link to the very intensive film study I did. Over the summer, I went and I watched every snap of Deshaun Watson's 2020 season. I graded every snap. I even put a bunch of clips and videos inside of the article so that you could see exactly what I was seeing when I was making these generalizations, when I was making these evaluations. And as always, the Patreon is totally free, so don't worry about that. But other than that, I got nothing to say. Hopefully next week Deshaun Watson is a little bit more impressive, so I have something to talk about in this video, but people really wanted to hear about Deshaun Watson, so here you go. Till next time, hasta.